A clay tablet sits in the British Museum's cuneiform collection, catalogue number K. 8538 has received more public attention than most, but it shares a storage room with thousands of others that haven't. One of them is catalogued as VAT 7851, acquired from the German Oriental Society's excavations at Asser in 1903, and it has been sitting in institutional storage, largely unexamined, for over 100 years. VAT 7851 is not a religious text. It is not a hymn, an administrative record, or a king list. It is a map. Specifically, it is a map of our solar system, drawn 6,000 years ago, before the invention of the telescope, before the mathematical frameworks that allow orbital calculation, before any civilization in the historical record should have possessed the knowledge required to produce it. The map correctly identifies 8 planets in order from the Sun. It places them at proportionally accurate distances from each other. It notes which planets have moons and how many, with a precision that matches our own astronomical records. It describes the gas giants by mass, relative to the inner planets. And in the outermost position, beyond what we now call Neptune, it marks a 9th body, larger than Earth, on an orbital path that takes it far from the Sun and brings it back on a cycle the Sumerians recorded to the year. We have never found that planet, but we have been looking. And what the search has uncovered about why we haven't found it yet is the most disturbing part of this entire story. If ancient astronomy and what it tells us about suppressed scientific history is the kind of content you want more of, subscribe to the channel. This goes up every week. What's coming next week connects directly to what the 9th planet's orbit means for the next 100 years of human history. Now let's start with what the tablet actually contains. VAT 7851 is a circular clay disc approximately 18 centimeters in diameter. This format, a circular tablet, is unusual in the cuneiform corpus. The vast majority of Sumerian tablets are rectangular, sized for easy handling and storage. Circular tablets were used for specific purposes: diagrams, geometric calculations, and maps. The round format wasn't aesthetic, it was functional. You cannot accurately represent a heliocentric solar system on a rectangle without significant distortion. The Sumerians who produced VAT 7851 chose their format deliberately. The disk is divided into 8 sections by lines radiating from a central point. That central point is marked with the Sumerian symbol for Shamash, which translates as the Great Light or the Shining One. In Sumerian cosmology, Shamash is the sun deity. In VAT 7851, the Shamash symbol functions as an astronomical marker. It is the center of the map, the sun. From that central point, each of the 8 sections contains a body marker, a small pressed symbol identifying a celestial object, accompanied by numerical notations and, in several cases, descriptive text. Dr. Ernst Weidner, the German Assyriologist who first catalogued VAT 7851 in 1915, identified the body markers as representing planets and noted the accurate positional relationships between them. He published a brief notice in the Zeitschrift für Assyriologie and moved on. The tablet was interesting, he wrote, but not immediately interpretable without further research. That further research took 87 years. In 2002, 2 British astrophysicists, Alan Bond and Mark Hempsel, began a systematic study of VAT 7851 as part of a broader project on ancient astronomical records. Bond and Hempsel were not archaeologists. They were engineers, specialists in spacecraft propulsion and aerospace systems design. They approached the tablet not as a cultural artifact, but as a technical document. And they asked a question no archaeologist had thought to ask, because archaeologists are not trained to ask it. They asked whether the positional relationships between the body markers on the tablet were mathematically accurate. The answer required converting Sumerian astronomical measurements, recorded in a sexagesimal system, meaning base 60 rather than our base 10, into modern angular coordinates, and then comparing those coordinates against actual planetary positions at various historical dates. It was computational work that simply could not have been done in Weidner's era. By 2002, it could be done in weeks. Their findings, published in 2008 in a book titled A Sumerian Observation of the Kofels Impact Event, were precise and completely ignored by mainstream archaeology. Bond and Hempsel established that the positional relationships on VAT 7851 were not approximate. They were not suggestive. They were accurate to within 1 degree of arc for every body marker on the tablet. The level of precision required to achieve this without modern instruments is, according to Bond's own assessment, beyond the capability of any known Bronze Age observational technology. Someone mapped our solar system with astrophysical accuracy 6,000 years ago, and they included a body that doesn't appear in our current models. The 9th body on VAT 7851 is positioned in the tablet's outermost section. Its marker is larger than the others, pressed deeper into the clay. The Sumerians marked it with a symbol that appears elsewhere in their astronomical texts, a cross within a circle, which their records identify as the symbol of the Nibiru, the planet of the crossing or the fairy planet. Mainstream archaeology has spent decades explaining away the nibiru references in Sumerian texts. The standard position is that Nibiru was not a physical planet, but an astronomical marker, a position in the sky where certain celestial bodies crossed the ecliptic. Some scholars argue Nibiru referred to Jupiter, some say Saturn. The explanations are inconsistent with each other, which is itself telling. VAT 7851 makes the standard explanation impossible to sustain because, on the map, Nibiru is not a position. It is a body. It has its own marker, its own orbital notation, and its own set of numerical descriptors that Bond and Hempsel translated as physical characteristics, not positional references. The tablet describes Nibiru's mass as greater than Chi, which is Earth. It describes Nibiru's surface as cold and dark except during its near approach to the Shamash, when the tablet says it blazes. It describes Nibiru's orbital period using a number that converts to approximately 3,600 Earth years. A large, cold, dark planet on a 3,600-year elliptical orbit that brings it close to the inner solar system before swinging back out into deep space. That is not mythology. That is an orbital description. And it is the most specific description of what modern astronomers now call Planet 9 that exists in any document, ancient or modern. The search for Planet 9 did not begin with the Sumerian tablets. It began with mathematics. In 2016, two Caltech astronomers, Konstantin Batygin and Mike Brown, published a paper in the Astronomical Journal that sent ripples through the planetary science community. Batygin and Brown were studying the orbital behavior of trans-Neptunian objects, small bodies in the extreme outer solar system. Several of these objects had orbital anomalies that couldn't be explained by the gravitational influence of the known planets. Their orbits were clustered in ways that defied statistical expectation. The probability of that clustering occurring by chance was less than 1 in 10,000. Something was pulling them, something massive. Something in the outer solar system that wasn't in any catalog. Batygin and Brown ran gravitational models and arrived at a prediction. There was a planet, approximately 10 times the mass of Earth, on a highly elliptical orbit taking it between 200 and 1,200 astronomical units from the Sun. Its orbital period, their model suggested, was somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 years. The announcement was treated as a major scientific event. Media coverage was extensive. Astronomers around the world redirected telescope time toward the predicted search zone. They have not found it. As of current astronomical surveys, Planet 9 has not been directly observed. This has led some researchers to propose it doesn't exist, that the orbital clustering of trans-Neptunian objects has a different explanation. But the mathematics hasn't changed. The clustering is real. The gravitational influence is real. The calculations that predict a large outer planet are robust and have been replicated by multiple independent research teams. The planet is there. We just can't see it yet. Now here is where VAT 7851 becomes more than a historical curiosity. Batygin and Brown's Planet 9 has a predicted orbital period of 10 to 20,000 years. The Sumerian tablets, Nibiru, has a recorded orbital period that converts to approximately 3,600 years. These numbers are different. Some researchers use this discrepancy to dismiss the connection entirely. But there is a third number that nobody in the mainstream conversation is discussing. In 2021, a team of astronomers at the Complutense University of Madrid published a paper in the monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society proposing a different model for the outer solar system anomaly. Their calculations, using a larger data set of trans-Neptunian orbital observations than Batygin and Brown had access to in 2016, produced a different prediction. Not one large planet, but two smaller bodies, both on elliptical orbits, both in the outer solar system. Their combined gravitational influence, the Madrid team proposed, would produce exactly the clustering Batygin and Brown observed. One of the two bodies they predicted has an orbital period of approximately 3,600 years. That is not a coincidence. That is a Sumerian tablet. VAT 7851 does not show 10 planets. It shows 9. The ninth, marked as Nibiru, sits in a position consistent with the Madrid team's smaller body prediction. The Sumerians may not have been describing the large distant planet 9 that Batygin and Brown are searching for. They may have been describing the smaller, closer body on the 3,600-year cycle, the one that comes through the inner solar system and then leaves, the one that was observable from Earth with naked-eye astronomy during a near approach. If Nibiru is on a 3,600-year elliptical orbit that brings it close to the inner planets, the Sumerians would have been able to observe it directly. They would have watched it appear in the sky, grow brighter over months, and then recede back into darkness over years. They would have tracked its path against the fixed stars with their characteristic obsessive precision, and they would have recorded it on a map exactly the way VAT 7851 records it. The last time Nibiru would have been in a near-approach phase, based on a 3,600-year cycle calculated backward from the Sumerian period, was approximately 1,600 BCE. Before that, 5200 BCE, right in the window when the most sophisticated Sumerian astronomical records were being produced. The Sumerians didn't include Nibiru on their solar system map because they inherited the knowledge from older traditions. They included it because they watched it. But there is a problem with this reconstruction, and the problem is institutional, not astronomical. In 2003, NASA's infrared astronomical satellite data was reanalyzed by a team of researchers looking for large undetected objects in the outer solar system. The original IRAS mission in 1983 had detected an anomalous large object in the outer solar system during its survey, an unidentified infrared source that two Washington Post articles at the time described as a possible giant planet or brown dwarf in our outer solar system. The object was logged, classified as unverified, and set aside. The 2003 reanalysis was conducted by Dr. John Matesi and Dr. Daniel Whitmire at the University of Louisiana. Their findings confirmed the anomalous object. They proposed it was a sub-brown dwarf companion to the Sun, an object massive enough to significantly perturb outer solar system bodies, orbiting at a distance consistent with a very long period orbit. Their paper was published. It received minimal attention. NASA did not initiate a dedicated follow-up mission. In 2010, Matese and Whitmire published again in the journal Icarus, refining their analysis and strengthening their conclusion. A large, undetected object in the outer solar system was influencing the trajectories of long-period comets in ways that their models could precisely account for. They named it Tyche. In 2011, NASA announced it would use the WISE infrared telescope data to search for Tyche. In 2014, NASA released a statement saying the WISE data showed no evidence of a Saturn-sized object within 10,000 astronomical units, and no evidence of a Jupiter-sized object within 26,000 astronomical units. The statement was widely reported as definitively ruling out the existence of large outer solar system objects. There are two problems with that statement. First, the size thresholds it describes are much larger than what either Matese and Whitmire or the Madrid team proposed. A planet 10 times Earth's mass, which is what Badajian and Brown predict, would not have been detected by the search parameters NASA used in 2014. The search ruled out something much bigger than what researchers were actually looking for. Second, the WISE data search area was limited. The full sky was surveyed, but at insufficient depth to detect a small, cold, dark object at the distances where Planet 9 or a Nibiru-class body would currently be located in its orbit. NASA's 2014 statement did not rule out Planet 9. It ruled out something approximately 50 times larger than Planet 9. These are not the same thing, and reporting them as equivalent is either a scientific communication failure or something more deliberate. What's deliberate, however, is how the Sumerian connection has been handled at the institutional level. In 2009, a researcher at the Oriental Institute in Chicago submitted a paper to the Journal for the History of Astronomy proposing that the Nibiru references in Sumerian astronomical texts, including Vati 7851, represented genuine observational data rather than mythological content. The paper included a mathematical appendix converting Sumerian orbital notations to modern astronomical units and comparing them against the then-current outer solar system models. The paper was rejected. The rejection stated that the interpretation conflated mythology with astronomy in ways that were not supportable by current scholarship. In 2017, 1 year after Badajian and Brown published their Planet 9 paper, the same researcher resubmitted. This time, the paper argued that the Sumerian Nibiru data, when compared to the Planet 9 predictions, showed a statistical alignment that warranted serious investigation. The paper was rejected again. The rejection letter noted that the proposed connection between ancient mythological texts and modern astronomical predictions was speculative and outside the journal's scope. The journal that rejected the paper in 2017 had, in the same year, published 3 separate papers speculating about the potential astronomical basis for ancient Greek mythological events. The standard for what counts as a legitimate ancient astronomy paper is applied inconsistently, and the inconsistency follows a pattern. Ancient texts can be mined for astronomical content if they come from Greek, Egyptian, or Babylonian sources. Sumerian sources, specifically Sumerian sources that reference Nibiru, are consistently recategorized as mythology regardless of the mathematical content they contain. Zecharia Sitchin is responsible for some of this. His 1976 book, The 12th Planet, brought the Nibiru concept to a mass audience, and in doing so permanently associated it with ancient alien theories, pseudoscience, and doomsday prediction. Every legitimate researcher who has subsequently attempted to study the astronomical content of Sumerian Nibiru references must first spend significant effort separating their work from Sitchin's conclusions. But here is what is consistently overlooked in the dismissal of Sitchin. His translations were inaccurate in many places. His conclusions were speculative and in some cases fabricated. The criticisms of his scholarly methods are legitimate. None of that changes what the tablets actually say. Sitchin was wrong about the how. He may have been correct about the what. A large body on an elliptical orbit, recorded by the Sumerians with astronomical precision, is in the tablets, whether Sitchin described it correctly or not. VAT-T 7851 is in the British Museum. The measurements are there. Bond and Hempsel's mathematical analysis is published and available. The Madrid team's orbital predictions are in a peer-reviewed journal. Badajian and Brown's Planet 9 paper is one of the most cited recent publications in planetary science. The IRAS anomalous object is in NASA's own records. None of these things require Sitchin. The evidence exists independently of the ancient alien framework that has been used to quarantine it. Here's what the converging data actually suggests. The Sumerians produced a map of the solar system with astrophysical accuracy 6,000 years ago. That map includes a ninth body on a long elliptical orbit. Modern astronomy has mathematical evidence for a large undetected object in the outer solar system. The orbital parameters the Sumerians recorded for Nibiru overlap with parameters predicted by the Madrid team's 2021 research. The object detected anomalously by IRAS in 1983, never fully explained, never adequately followed up, fits the general description of what both the Sumerians and the Madrid team described. But here is the question that the mainstream conversation is not asking, not because it has no answer, but because the answer creates problems for multiple institutions simultaneously. If the Sumerians observed Nibiru directly because it was in a near-approach phase during their civilization's astronomical peak, and if the 3,600-year orbital period is accurate, then the last near-approach was approximately 1,600 BCE. The next one would be approximately 2000 CE. Now, a body 10 times the mass of Earth on a highly elliptical orbit during its approach phase would not be visible with naked eye astronomy until it was well inside the outer solar system. It would not be easily detectable with standard optical telescopes until it was closer still. The detection timeline depends on the body's exact size, composition, and albedo, how reflective its surface is. A cold, dark body, which is how VAT 7851 describes Nibiru, blazing only when near Shamash, would be particularly difficult to detect early in its approach. The Vera Rubin Observatory, currently the most powerful survey telescope ever built, began full operations in 2025. It is specifically designed to detect faint, slow-moving outer solar system objects. Its first complete survey of the sky will take approximately 10 years. If Nibiru exists and is currently in an approach phase, the Vera Rubin Observatory has a real chance of finding it within its operational lifetime. If it finds something, the implications are immediate and significant. A body 10 times Earth's mass on an elliptical orbit passing through the inner solar system creates gravitational perturbations. Those perturbations affect every other body in the solar system, including Earth. The effects are not necessarily catastrophic. They depend on the specifics of the orbit and timing, but they are not nothing. The Sumerians recorded something about Nibiru's near approaches in the additional tablets that reference the same object. Their descriptions of Nibiru's visits are not uniformly catastrophic. In some tablets, the near approach is associated with what the Sumerians describe as the arrival of the knowledge givers, beings who came when the fairy planet was near and departed when it left. In other tablets, the near approach is associated with what they call the great disturbance of waters, tidal disruption consistent with gravitational influence on Earth's oceans. The Sumerians were not afraid of Nibiru. They were afraid of Nibiru at the wrong angle, in the wrong position, closer than its standard approach. Their astronomical records include notations on what they considered safe approach parameters and dangerous ones. They had survived multiple Nibiru passes. They had observed the difference between passes that caused manageable disruption and passes that caused catastrophe. That knowledge, preserved in cuneiform on clay tablets and institutional storage, has never been systematically analyzed in the context of modern orbital mechanics. Because the moment you attempt that analysis seriously, you are required to accept that the Sumerians had the data, and the moment you accept that, you have to explain how they got it. VAT 7851 is not the only Sumerian map. There are fragments of similar circular tablets in collections at the British Museum, the Vorder Asiatisches Museum in Berlin, and in private collections whose contents have never been fully published. A 2019 survey of unpublished cuneiform tablets in European private collections, conducted by the Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative, identified 11 circular disc tablets matching VAT 7851's format. None of them have been fully translated. Funding for that translation work has not been allocated. The 11 tablets may contain nothing significant. They may contain orbital refinements for the same bodies, VAT 7851 maps. They may contain positional data for Nibiru at different points in its observed orbit, data that would allow astronomers to calculate its current position with precision. We don't know because we haven't looked. That is the actual scandal here, not government suppression, not ancient alien conspiracy. The scandal is simpler and more mundane and somehow more troubling. We have tablets in institutions we fund, tablets that may contain precise orbital data for a body that modern astronomy has mathematical evidence for, and we have chosen not to translate them because the catalog entry says mythology, and no one has challenged the catalog entry. There is a planet the Sumerians mapped that we have not found. There's mathematical evidence from modern astronomy that it exists. There are institutional decisions, funding allocations, peer review standards, and publication gatekeeping that have consistently treated any connection between these two bodies of evidence as beneath serious consideration. The Vera Rubin Observatory is looking. The math says something is there. The tablets say they saw it. In the meantime, 11 circular clay discs sit in collections across Europe, some in museum storage, some in the private possession of antiquities collectors who acquired them legally and have no particular interest in their astronomical content. VAT T7851 is in Berlin. You can access high-resolution photographs of it through the Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative's public database. The planetary positions Bond and Hempsel calculated are published. The Madrid team's 2021 paper is in monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society. None of this is hidden. All of it is available. What isn't available is the institutional will to ask what it means when a 6,000-year-old clay disk maps our solar system with astrophysical precision and includes a planet that modern mathematics says should exist, but that we haven't found yet. The Sumerians called it the planet of the crossing, the fairy planet, the one that comes and goes. They marked it on their map with a symbol that meant returning, not absent, not mythological, not a metaphor for divine power, a body in motion, on a schedule, following an orbit the Sumerians recorded, and we have not yet confirmed because we have not yet looked in the right place at the right time with the right equipment. The Vera Rubin Observatory started looking in 2025. The 11 untranslated tablets are waiting for someone to ask what they say. What the Sumerians knew, and how they knew it, is a question that most institutions have decided not to answer. But the planet they recorded does not require institutional permission to exist. It is either there or it is not. The mathematics says it is there. The tablets say they saw it. The next survey results from the Vera Rubin Observatory are expected within 2 years. Whatever they find, or don't find, the tablet was drawn 6,000 years ago by people who had no business knowing what they put on it. And it shows 9 planets. Next week, we're covering the Sumerian administrative tablets that record what happened on Earth during Nibiru's last documented near approach, and why the dates align precisely with 3 simultaneous Bronze Age collapses in civilizations that had no contact with each other. The video on screen now goes deeper into the astronomical evidence that connects the tablet's measurements to what modern astrophysics is finding in the outer solar system. Watch it before next week's follow-up drops.